In 2050th year, the whole world was talking about one thing. There wasn't a single person who didn't play Darkness. People spent all their free time playing the game in the hope of becoming the strongest. And with this popularity, professional teams have emerged. One of those teams was Team D1. The main office was located in the very center of Seoul. D1 was ranked #1 in the world rankings among all players. Every self-respecting player wanted to join their ranks. D1 team members, practicing and improving their characters day and night, and all thanks to great funding from sponsors. Every member of D1 was a world celebrity. Even though they were the best team in the world, there was one player who wouldn't give up on them, and the name of this hero is Dex. He was not a member of any team. He went all the way alone. And despite that, he caused a lot of trouble for D alone. The other players thought Dex with an arrogant and egotistical troll. For months, D1 practiced their skills and strategy to fight him. Because the strongest team in the world couldn't handle one player, he became world famous as the invincible troll. Dex's strength was truly amazing. With a single blow, he could easily take away the arm of the strongest of the team. All the work and strategy D1 had done shattered in seconds with just one Dex hit. But they weren't going to give up so easily. They still had a few gifts for Dex. After all, they are the strongest team in the world. It's funny, watching the strongest team in the world panic at the sight of just one player. All their attacks were too predictable. And the battle, it was more like Dex was playing with them. One by one, Dex killed the team members without much trouble. In just half a minute, he had dealt with their tank and damage dealer. Dex hid his real name until last, all to become a top one, and killing the strongest players single-handedly. Achieving this title will be easy. From now on, Team D1's reputation is forever destroyed. It is unthinkable for the strongest team in the world to lose to one unknown player. But Dex did the impossible. Their battle was watched by over 1.5 million people. And everyone asked one question: who is he? Dex is actually just an ordinary student. He has no friends, no girlfriend. He spent all his time playing Darkness, and his real name is Jin Gong. But to the world, he was known by many different names. But now, everyone knows him as Dex. In the world, his name has become synonymous with troll. Why a troll? It's because after each of his victories, he mocked his opponent, who was already having a hard time. Once he's achieved his goal, Dex will leave the Darkness forever. For the genie is no longer interested, especially since more and more people are leaving computer games lately. One of the reasons was the arrival of a new virtual reality game called Arcadia. 3 leading companies in the world of gaming, IG Electronics, Argo Corporation, and Silikov have joined forces to create a game in secret. But not a computer game, but one that can only be played with a special machine called a Drimmer. An exciting life awaits players in Arcadia, falling into a world of unlimited possibilities. But the biggest problem was buying a Drimmer, because it's not cheap. But even still, the pre-order closed in less than 10 minutes. And Gene, as an avid gambler, couldn't pass up the chance. After spending all his savings, he bought himself a Dreamer. That was it. It was time to say goodbye to Dex for good. Jin deleted his Darkness account without a second thought. Now Gene is off to a new world. Something unexplored and interesting to him. Arcadia, meet your new hero! For a genie, it's unbelievable. Everything around here is so real. I wonder what the best player in the world can accomplish in Arcadia. There are a lot of different games out there, and each one has to have something to catch your eye. To do this, the developers shove in countless secrets, from simple jokes to cheats and tricks that greatly change gameplay. And Arcadia in this did not lag behind. The whole world was filled with different surprises that can help the player in the development of his character. By connecting the Drimmer directly to the brain, the experience is incredibly realistic. In this way, the experience gained in virtual reality is transferred to the real world. It turns out that words about new features are not just the words of marketers. Despite the fact that the first server of Arcadia worked me more than a day, many players have already organized a market and sell their loot. The first thing Jin decided to do was check his inventory, hoping to see something useful in there. As expected, all of his items were from the lowest rank. When he opened the quest section, he saw that he already had a quest. His first quest was to kill a slime. A slime is a little piece of jelly, of absolutely no value or danger whatsoever. It would seem that even such an easy task causes a lot of problems for beginners. After all, it is very difficult to make sharp movements in Arcadia. To simplify movement, there is a skill tree, in which you can exchange experience points for various skills. However, nothing is impossible for the omnipotent genie. His past experience allowed him to finish the first quest with ease. For completing the first mission, Jin was awarded 1 experience point. Jin thought it would be easy to pump up his character. The second task was to read 100 books. When Jin saw this assignment, he was puzzled. After all, in what kind of game is it even necessary to read books? The first impression of the game is ruined. Anyway, without completing this quest, he wouldn't be able to move on to the next point, so Jin went to the Adel library. He spent 24 hours a day reading books one by one. The girls who worked in the library were very surprised by this. After all, not a dozen players just took and flipped through these books without thinking about what they read. But Jin wasn't like that. He read every word. Not that he was interested. It's just that he didn't know you could just flip through them. The library now. I thought he'd just give up. As suddenly Jin comes up to her and asks if they have a second tom then, and the book he was reading. She couldn't believe that he was actually reading all those books. Just Jin was interested in some of the things in this book, and he thought there might be answers to them in Volume 2. The book that interested Jin was called The Story of Arcadia, the First Trace of Edeline. Upon receiving the second volume of this book, Jin asked why it was kept separate from all the other books. The whole point is that this is a special book that is only given out by direct request. I wonder what makes this book so special. There's a reason it's kept separate. As soon as Jin touched the book, the first passphrase was revealed, which opens up a secret mission for him. By opening this assignment, Jin gained the status of a player worthy of special attention. A long time ago, a legendary adventurer walked this world. Legend has it that he hid his treasure at the bottom of a lake near the initial town of Edeline. He's been rumored for years, but no one's ever found him. One thing is certain, the treasure was the first trace of darkness, giving incredible power to its possessor. They say Ezreal hid a lake near Edeline. However, no one ever found the Trail of Darkness, and the legend slowly faded into oblivion, and it remained a legend. Gina, this assignment was very interesting. When he opened the map, he saw that there was only one lake with the city called Irunda. Getting there was a piece of cake. After all, this lake is marked on every map, even though it was just a legend. But Jin couldn't help but check it out. Suddenly, an information window appeared in front of Genie saying that he had opened a rank B mission. With his current level, even the most important quests should be no higher than rank C. But this way, it's even more interesting. If Jin doesn't take the treasure, someone else will. I wonder how Jin will deal with the problems in his way before climbing into the lake. Jin decided to look around the area around the lake, but there was nothing unusual around. Making sure there's no treasure around the lake, there's only one option left. Diving under the water, Jin immediately realized that this was an unusual lake. It was incredibly deep. Meanwhile, there was a real panic at Arcadia headquarters. This man's name is Chang, and he's the CEO. He didn't understand how someone managed to open the main plot assignment in less than a week. After all, they were calculating that it would take at least 6 months for the players to get there. Chan ordered the entire department to prepare for emergencies. Meanwhile, he decided to go to the president of the company. Meanwhile, Jin had already dived out of the lake. He had managed to increase his diving skill to rank B, thereby increasing his stamina. The first time, Jin dived to 20 meters, but he couldn't see the bottom, so he decided to give up, thinking it was just a legend. The game has just opened, the rating is not yet established, so everyone is trying to get ahead. There is no time to pump diving skill at such a crucial moment. More importantly, the Drimmer costs the genie $1,000 monthly. Jin was going to cover the costs with in-game sales of in-game items. However, this assignment could solve all his problems. After all, the other players don't know about it. It would be a shame if the reward was useless, and yet no gamer would miss such a chance. In the US, Arcadia launched over 3 months ago, but still no one has come out for the main story. So the news that the first mission of the main story had already opened on the Korean server after 4 days. The CEO of the US office was very surprised. The head of the US office was Jenica Pohl, and the news almost killed her. After all, if this continues, this player will soon reach the main plot. Jenny was furious that someone got the idea to hide such an important artifact early in the game. However, it was too late to make changes because this book had already been discovered. 10 days later, the genie still managed to get the Trail of Darkness from one lake. During these days, Genie was able to upgrade his diving skill to rank A. He could now dive incredibly deep. By completing this mission, Jin was rewarded with a necklace of darkness, and some experience points of darkness contains traces of an unknown ancient age. It is only through incredible effort that you will be able to use this item. Even though the description sounded threatening enough, but it didn't explain how to use it. As suddenly, a game notification popped up asking if Jin wanted to use the necklace. After a brief moment of thought, Jin agrees. He wonders what he has spent 10 whole days on.
It seemed like a game. Doesn't want Jin to activate it. Asking dozens of follow-up questions.
But in doing so, it only further piqued Jin's interest. A sinister voice appeared out of nowhere and said, "If you've gotten this far, you must be sure you want to use this item. But don't complain later, you were warned." That strange voice, it was clearly this guy. But who he is, I don't know what he wants. But from now on, Jin must create confusion and chaos. That's the price for using the medallion. By activating the medallion, the game automatically changed the genie's class to Bard of Anarchy. The pumping system has been removed. The whole interface changed beyond recognition, and the first task appeared. And the genie's first assignment as Bard of Anarchy was to kill the new guy, and the more the better. The best place for a mission like this would be the western steppes of Edelin, where the slime colonies live. It is in these steppes that every novice player undertakes their first slime-killing mission. Jin felt uneasy about this mission, because unlike a normal game, in Arcadia, people feel everything. Not wanting to fulfill this mission, Jin decided to delete his character and start fresh. But it's not that simple. He can't delete his character, getting a secret class before seeing a bunch of warning windows. And it was presumptuous to try to delete the character immediately afterwards. Plus, Jim didn't understand why his character was missing a level bar. The level pumping system is a gaming classic, and such an important part of the game that it is now missing. It means he can't develop like that anymore. Maybe it's not much of a difference now. But soon all users will begin to level up rapidly, increasing their skills, and the gulf between them will grow with each level and eventually become colossal. But Jin couldn't get the words about chaos and confusion out of his head. It was too late for regrets. Even though the whole no-pumping thing sounds dubious, he's got some kind of secret class after all, and he must have some kind of special power. After lying there thinking, he decided to scrutinize the status window for clues. And I did find something. He had a new measure of decency, which was 0. Thanks to decency, the player can increase his influence on the world order and interfere in the course of things. When used, the parameter is reduced. At the very beginning of the game, it sounds quite strange. After all, it is absolutely unclear what this skill affects. While Jin was thinking about what this skill gave him, he unknowingly created a new mission. And as unfortunate as it is, the genie's gonna have to kill the new guy anyway. Interestingly, the basic rules of the game prohibit killing other players who have not reached level 5. But the system forces Jin to do it. So he decides to just go with the flow. Now it's time for Jin to earn his first kill. I wonder with his skill set, what it will do for him. It's a shame to spoil someone's game, but it can't be helped. If you want to develop, you have to act. Before Jin could even get close to the newcomers, they were surrounded by a group of bandits, who claimed these hunting fields as their own. Although there is no such thing in the game, Jin clearly didn't expect this turn of events. The game has only recently opened for beta test, and someone is already dividing territories. So far, most players on the continent hadn't even reached level 3. And these same players had managed to reach level 12. Their nicknames were lit in red above their heads. This means that they had previously killed other players. This girl, screaming and begging for someone to help them. But nobody cared. No one wanted to get into a fight with high-level players. Crazy Monkey says games are good because they don't have the rules of the real world. It's all about power, and Jin was in complete agreement. He was the only one who stood up for these newcomers. Amazingly, the genie only needed one attack to defeat 3 high-level bandits at once. I guess that's the power of Bard Chaos. For each of the bandits, Jin got 1 decency point. The newcomers he saved fell on their knees and shouted with joy, "You saved us, how can we thank you?" But they didn't know they were Jin's next targets yet. And that's when Jin said, "Don't take offense, you guys. It's just a game." With 1 punch, he split that poor guy open. All this just to raise your integrity. Ironic. You have to kill people to raise your integrity. Well, there were a lot of newcomers to the field, so it was their time. From that day on, word spread through the Arcadia forums. Everyone kept saying the same thing. There was a real nutcase in the game. He had no mercy for anyone. He was a real mystery to all the players. No one had ever seen his level. Jin, for weeks, continued his hunt for newcomers, slaying them by the dozens. No newcomer has ever escaped his grasp. Every aspiring gambler prayed he wouldn't meet Dex, who didn't understand why he was slaughtering newbies in droves. After all, he wouldn't get any experience if he were a regular player. The more newcomers he killed, the more powerful he became in the Arcadian realm. And the crazier he got, even if he didn't know how to use the points he earned. And the dope. Obviously, the more you collect, the better. Suddenly, another newcomer says, "What do you think you're doing? Do you think the developers will let you do something so crazy at the very beginning of the game?" Those words made Gene laugh so hard he said, "What are you talking about? They told me to do it." The rookie couldn't believe his ears. But now he would be able to share the news with the others, only on the forum. Despite a seemingly low strength rating, Jin can easily kill any newcomer in a single blow. It looks like Jin's already brought chaos into the game. But he doesn't know what he's doing it for. Arcadia has a system of punishing players for death. After death, the user is blocked access to the game for a day. It helps players to relax from the game as well as increase realism. Meanwhile, in Arcadia's tech support office, it's hell. There aren't enough cameramen to go around. And it's all because of Jin and his killing of the rookies. Managed to earn over 1,000 points already, and every point is someone's character. Killing players is more energy-consuming than he thought. And the general hatred is mentally taxing. Suddenly, the genie wondered if he'd get in trouble for it. After all, the administration couldn't just leave the killing of 1,000 newcomers to chance. But on the other hand, they gave him the assignment. So I don't think they're gonna punish him for this one. Suddenly, Jin heard a strange rustling in the bushes behind him. Weirdly, it's a whole pack of slimes. And they're all crying for some reason. But they were tears of joy. Because Gene had unlocked the slime rescue achievement, earning their trust. Of course he did. Because Jin killed all the newbies whose first mission was to kill a slime. Well, that's an unexpected twist. Gene thought he'd only made enemies, but these little guys don't seem to mind keeping him company. When suddenly, from deep in the woods, there came the shout of an angry mob, and the lights from torches appeared. Looks like Genie's made some enemies after all. I wonder what a bunch of dumbasses can do to Jin. Anyway, Jin decided to avoid this battle. After all, he was exhausted, and hadn't slept for 2 whole days. The rookies managed to corner him after all. It's just not clear who's going to be the worse for it. And at the head of the rookie squads was an old acquaintance of ours that Jin killed yesterday. Jin wanted to avoid this fight for 2 reasons. First, he was too tired. Secondly, such a massacre of newcomers might attract the attention of the developers. So without a second thought, Jin jumped off the cliff and straight down. Now his reputation as a madman would be even more true. Jumping from that height, there's absolutely no way anyone could survive. Even if the strength of the body is pumped up to 100. But Jin's proved to be far more cunning than all the other dots, and at the point of the fall simply stepped out of the game. The video of Jin killing thousands of pledges quickly went viral. Some players condemned Jin's actions. Others were supportive. But all agreed that he was a real madman, an old acquaintance of ours that Jin killed on the second day. Couldn't just leave this situation alone. So I decided to research the issue on the forums. And I was able to personally verify 700 cases of such murders. Realizing he couldn't take him on alone, he created a Dex task force, which anyone could join. You may not believe this, but he's managed to round up over 100 new recruits, and all of them have been killed by Jin at some point, some of them twice. They called themselves the Troll Cleanup Squad. Their main goal was to kill Jin for good. What attracts players most of all to the virtual world of Arcadia is the freedom to play different roles and create their own stories. And it's not limited to one game when players from all over the world join forces by coordinating over the internet, and all at the behest of the artificial intelligence controlling the world of the game. Alice's will. Her main job was to control the players. She could adjust to the actions taking place in the game. So, she created an assignment for a troll sweep squad. That's the beauty of it, Arcadia. She adjusts to the events that happen. If she finds them interesting, she starts to develop them. And the squad's first assignment was to hunt down the pledge killer. All they had to do was catch Jin. Meanwhile, there's been another emergency at Arcadia's Korean office, is that there's a new assignment not approved by your superiors, which greatly displeased the manager of the script development team, Mr. Kang. But none of his employees knew why this happened. It's an incredibly serious, game-breaking accident. Actually, a randomly generated assignment doesn't always cause such a stir. It's all in the nature of the assignment. They may not have known what the assignment was. But one thing they knew for sure was that this assignment was related to the first act of the main plot. None of the team expected this. Just a couple of days after the main scenario was created, the first assignment was given out. Creation and beginning. The difference is not obvious, but it is there. A seed planted in the soil does not germinate immediately for the scenario to develop enough to have any impact on gameplay. Supposedly, it was supposed to take 6 months. At least that's what the script team thought. But 2 days is too long a difference to write it off as a miscalculation. Then there must be a reason for it, thought Mr. Khan. While researching all of Khan's materials, he came across Jin's video. He didn't know who Jin was, so he asked that his assistant tell him everything. They wanted to find out as much information about Jin as they could, but they couldn't get his IP address, because someone at the main office restricted their access. And meanwhile, Jin, the real Jin, was resting after a sleepless night, not even realizing he was being hunted in both worlds. When Jin woke up, the first thing he did was log into the game. He saw that the entire server was on the hunt for a newbie killer. It was easy to guess that the hunt was for Jin. He was so shocked that he couldn't move for several minutes. This ad has gotten over 100,000 likes and 10,000 comments. And judging by the comments, Jin's in big trouble. And that's when Gina decided he should lay low and stay out of the game for a while, even though the Drimmer was costing him a lot of money. After weighing the pros and cons, Jin decided to get back in the game and see what happens. Even though he had numerous kills, he didn't think the game would create a separate mission to capture him. A colony of slimes used to be the easiest place for a newcomer to stumble upon. But that's all changed now, so we're gonna have to find a new place. But then Jin, he heard a sad squeak. It was a little slime. Apparently he was upset that Jin was leaving them. Meanwhile, nearby, 2 newcomers, and were on their way to fulfill their first mission. One of them was called Akaps. He chose to be a warrior, while his friend chose to be a mage, who was not capable of anything at the beginning levels, because this was their first assignment. They had to kill a slime. When they saw a player they didn't recognize standing with the slime, they began to threaten him, saying that this slime is theirs, because they've already hurt him. But looking at the slime, Jin didn't see the slightest scratch on him. Jin, without saying a word, started walking towards the 2 rookies. It would be another easy 2 points for him. When suddenly Money Shake said he'd seen this guy before. Jin's whole demeanor indicated that he was ready to kill them. But this time, something was wrong. Because if he wanted to kill them, he would have done it immediately. What's all the pathos for? Jin provoked the Akapses, and he punched him in the face. Is this all part of his plan? When all of a sudden Jin screamed, "Murderer! Murderer!" and the Akapsis nickname started to turn red. It's so simple and ingenious it seems crazy. Most players don't know exactly what Jin looks like, but would kill any newbie with a red nickname. This, in a second, attracted the other players. After all, everyone wanted the reward for the rookie killer. After convincing the others that Akapsis was the rookie killer, Jin disappeared with the slime into the thick of the forest. Funny how easily Jin was able to fool so many people into believing that these 2 fools were the rookie killer. To save a slime from destruction, Jin has earned the title of Friend of the Slimes. Now the slimes can come to his aid at any time. Considering how many slime deaths he prevented by killing newbies, he deserved the title. However, first-level slimes alone won't be enough. He needs the kind of ally that can help him in battle. When suddenly, Jin accidentally opened an information window. It said that he had accumulated enough integrity points, and he could help the slimes. Jin didn't understand exactly how he was supposed to help, but when he opened their information window, he immediately understood. Thanks to his integrity, he can influence key aspects of this game, including the characteristics of NPCs. Jin spent all of his accumulated decency points on improving his new friends. Now Jin has an army of level 15 monsters on his side. Monsters. Their purpose is to act as an adversary and target for the player. No RPG is without them. And in the bestiary of every game, there are monsters designed for beginners. Inexperienced players train their combat skills on them and familiarize themselves with the mechanics of the game that can be called learning monsters. And Arcadia is no exception. The role of such educational monsters in it is played by slimes. So what if the starting monsters become so strong that newbies don't stand a chance against them? Result should definitely show on the official site of Arcadia. And just a couple hours later, a video called Slimes Too Strong appeared on their official channel, which has garnered 1,400,000 views. The developers didn't have time to remedy that situation, and all newcomers are sent to fight with slimes, without expecting them to die. After all, the slime was originally intended to be expendable, and now it's a killing machine. No fear, no pain, no mercy. The result of spending over 1,000 decency points exceeded all expectations. Slimes. They're not the same harmless jelly cuties anymore. On average, 10,000 new players come to Arcadia every day. That means total annihilation. New players, day in and day out. trying to complete the first quest. But to no avail, every time the slime won. Jin couldn't believe what he'd done. Now the first quest is simply unfulfilled. And before, the slimes never attacked first. Now they're starting fights. But why have they become so aggressive? Is it really about character enhancement? It turns out that decency not only increases characteristics, but also changes them. Now, Jin realized what the stranger meant when he said he could influence the game. As suddenly, in the distance, Jin notices the slimes starting to attack a group of newcomers who were hunting Jin. They obviously didn't expect regular slimes. I'd like to see their faces when they find out who's behind all this. It was a real surprise for the troll sweep squad when an enhanced, but still slime was able to kill a player. Whoa, why is it that Jin can see the slime's info window? Would killing them count against him? That's what it really turned out to be. All the murders are on the enhanced slimes. Gonna give the genie 1 integrity point. Things turned out much better than Jin could have imagined. After all, he now had a passive farmer of points. After only 2 hours, the slimes had earned the genie nearly 4,000 decency points, while Jin did absolutely nothing. And it would take him 10 times as long to collect that many points. It's no longer about trying to complete a task. Jin, you should try to get as many points as possible, and try to reinforce the slimes again. Unfortunately, Jin pumped the slimes to the max. Not that Jin resented it. But it would be nice to improve them some more. Although if you think about it, this level is more than enough for now. Meanwhile, at Arcadia's Korean office, Mr. Chan was furious that, in the last few hours, their game has received an incredible amount of negative feedback. In a shaky voice, Mr. Khan said that the reason for this was the dramatic increase in regular slimes. This had led to a high mortality rate for all aspiring players, because the main office didn't respond. The head of the Korean wing decided to handle it personally. Mr. Chan suddenly asked, "How many experience points are given to newcomers at the moment?" To which Mr. Khan replied, "Sir, exactly 100 points. Through simple math, it became clear that the improved slimes deal damage that can kill a level 1 player with a single hit. Mr. Chan was sure it wasn't some mistake or misunderstanding, or even a miscalculation. After all, with this technology, it's simply impossible. The only way to figure this out is to get in the game yourself. Because if you can't see what's going on from the outside, you have to look at it from the inside. Whatever was going on in there, it couldn't be left alone. But upon entering the game, he had an unexpected encounter with Alice. Meanwhile, Jim came to see how the slimes were doing. But when he got there, he didn't see anyone. When I opened the stats, I realized something was wrong. Because the rate of growth in kills has slowed down considerably. I guess word of the dangers of this place has gotten around, and no one comes here anymore. But that's not all. The slime fields have been claimed by level 15 players, who are killing slimes in droves. Jin's working on that right now. From the looks of it, Jin won't be getting any more. It's not all bad, though. The numbers are going up, just slower. When suddenly, there was a loud clang signaling that Jin had earned 10,000 points. And as a reward, Jin was named Rookie Killer, and a medium-sized treasure chest. Without thinking for a long time, Jin decided to open this chest. But as soon as he did, a huge amount of energy burst out of the chest. The flash was so strong that it was easily mistaken for an explosion. Could it be that instead of a reward, Jin had opened a trap? This clot of energy seemed to have a life of its own, emitting a bright light. But after taking a closer look at the orb, Jin thought he'd been rewarded with a monster egg. As soon as Jin thought about it, the sphere began to crack, making a horrible whistling noise. Eventually, this orb exploded and shattered into several pieces. Oh my god, this can't be happening. That wasn't a monster egg, it was a sphere of familiars. Jin clearly didn't expect to see an entity with such a strong aura. After all, a familiard is usually just an ordinary sidekick. But in Jin's case, it's different. He was able to summon the Lord of Chaos and the Demon Lord, because the genie's level is still too low. He was only strong enough to summon Satan as a child. But that, no big deal. Even in that state, he's extremely strong. Except Satan didn't expect it to be the size of a slime, and he wasn't happy about it. In a fit of anger, Satan asked Jin if he had called him, to which Jin replied that he didn't know how to do that yet, and he had gotten it as a reward as an heirloom. Satan couldn't believe his ears. How the king of demons and hell could be something of a family man. But most of all, Satan was concerned that he had become part of the pact without his own agreement. The thing is, Satan doesn't do anything without making a contract, which has to have his consent. This time is different. But since they have a contract, with Satan as his familiar, they'll have to work together. Jin was discouraged by the whole situation. After all, he's got a demon king sitting on his head. the most powerful monsters in Arcadia, when suddenly Satan sensed something inexplicable. He sensed that Jin had an incredible hidden power that he didn't even know about yet. That's not what they have yet to figure out, when suddenly an information window appeared, saying that the player can spend his earned points to improve the heirloom. And right after that came a warning, because the genie's last name was Demon. Beware of deception and temptation. After learning about Jin's ability to pump up his heirlooms, Satan realized why he'd been dragged into this contract. Satan had his own plans for Jin's power, when suddenly Satan cried out with joy, "Hey, this is your power! Share it with me!" Jin was at a loss. He didn't understand how Satan knew about this. The bond between the familiar and the master was much stronger than he had thought. In the hands of the demon, decency can make Arcadia a living hell. In return for his integrity, the demon promised to reward Jin handsomely. His offer sounded tempting enough. And Gina, you could say anything you wanted, he was a fool. He realized that if the Demon King was interested in his ability, it's a very valuable characteristic, but Jin still asked what he would get in return for his ability, and with that he had something to offer him. He pulled a robe from his inventory, with incredible characteristics. The wearer of this mantle becomes invulnerable. Well, a wife, it took a level 50 just to put it on. So he turned down the demon's offer. Satan, even a little disappointed that Jin refused. But on the other hand, he was happy that his master wasn't so stupid. And then Satan decided to ask what Jin wanted in return for his power. Jin thought long and hard, and finally, he came up with a brilliant idea. "Jin, I asked Satan for more slimes. Demon, that put him in a stupor for a while." When all of a sudden, Satan started laughing uproariously. He asked Jin why he was doing this. Because it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Satan agreed to do it. But before he did, he decided to negotiate a price for his favor. Jin promised that if Satan could really improve the slimes, he was willing to give him all his decency points. Satan, without further question, decided to make this pact. In exchange for his points, Jin received a slime queen, cellular level. Overall, the exchange can be considered equal. Level 1 or level 12, but a slime is a slime. A simple monster with predictable attacks. And for high-level players, it's a great opportunity to earn mountains of experience. For them, the slimes were a treasure. Didn't let them level up without much trouble. When suddenly, on their next slime hunt, there she was. But she didn't come alone. She had an army of high-level slimes with her. They were many times faster and stronger than all the monsters they had fought before. Slimes love peace and quiet more than anything. When they wandered with green meadows and their happiness was unbounded. However, humans came and began to mercilessly destroy the defenseless slimes. They had been patient for a long time, but at one point the cup of patience was overflowing as they realized that peace and quiet must first be defended. Many slimes have laid their lives on the altar of a common goal, the creation of a great ruler to lead the entire race. Her rage knew no bounds. She felt each slime's pain, their bitterness of loss. Her bloodlust is relentless. She won't rest until she's killed everyone who's ever harmed her family. Her punishment will come upon everyone, and those who survive will envy the dead. Jin knew that the slimes would never be the same again, that they would become so strong he couldn't even imagine it. When suddenly Jin said, "Wait, I asked to reinforce them, not to create super-intelligence monsters." And it's true, Satan does seem to have overdone it a bit. If she were just a little bit stronger, she'd be worthy of joining the ranks of the demon legionnaires. Satan actually enhanced the slimes. He just gave them a thirst for revenge, which exceeded his expectations. And then the demon said, "What did you think? All I did was help them realize who's to blame for all their troubles. With a generous donation from you." Jin couldn't believe that it was enough for just a little crumb to raise an entire race to a new stage of evolution. Anyway, the demon had kept his end of the bargain. It was Jin's turn. Now, this incredible power of decency is in the hands of the most cunning and evil monster in all of Arcadia. Meanwhile, the slime army is on the offensive. If they can break through the first line of defense, none of the players will survive. This is the first battle of its kind in Arcadian history, and all at the hands of one man's body. Each player on the server received a notification about the start of the main story. The quest to hunt a rookie assassin has been deleted, but a new one has been added in its place. The task of all the players was to stop the evil slime invasion. If the humans were defeated, they would lose their city forever. Most of the players were horrified by this. All they wanted to do was have a good time in the game. Instead, they were in for a bloody battle. And meanwhile, the Slime Queen has already reached the city. Genie and Satan are left to watch from the sidelines. This quickly bored the genie, but there was nothing to do, as suddenly the demon suggested the genie sneak into town and destroy the rookie crystal, while everyone is busy saving their lives. For a reason, he holds the unofficial title of King of Deception. He's trying to get Jin to be his puppet. As a friend, the genie started getting 1,000 notifications of decency points. That's all very well, of course. But if it continues like this, Arcadia will soon be gone, which is why the genie needs to intervene now. Now, the genie is faced with a tough choice. Which side to take, the monsters or the players? Meanwhile, in the main office, Arcadia observed the whole situation. Now, every decision could be fatal. Part of Mr. Chan's team was inclined to shut down all the servers immediately, because in their opinion, there was some kind of glitch. Even more so, Ms. Wong aggravated the situation. After all, she's like the head of design. She doesn't remember them creating such a monster. For the developers, what was happening was something inexplicable. First, the unexpected beginning of the main scenario. Then this weird assignment to catch a rookie killer, who's impossible to track down. Now a slime queen that wasn't even created by the developers themselves. But Mr. Chan has forbidden shutting down the servers, because that would directly contradict their main idea of total freedom of action, and put 2 plus 2 together. Mr. Chan realized that everything that was happening was the work of just one player, and if his assumptions are correct. And what happens is the result of in-game decisions by the player. They have no right to interfere, even if it has devastating consequences. And meanwhile, the players fought the slimes with all their might, and the city was almost destroyed. But the battle continued. Even despite the seemingly hopeless situation, the players fought shoulder to shoulder. Maybe this player versus slime war isn't as bad an idea as it seemed at first glance, but the town put up thanks to a mysterious adventurer. In addition to the regular players, the city's defenses were held by its guards. But even their increased life expectancy doesn't guarantee their survival. But the guards had one advantage over the ordinary players. They were a well-coordinated team ready to come to the rescue in times of need. The guards, too, were known for their bravery and fearlessness. Guardian asked his rescuer to look for him after the battle, because he wants to give him his grandfather's diary, which is full of secrets about the game, when suddenly one of the guards received a notice of completion of a hidden task. The reward for completing it was a hero's profession. Now, a young guardian needs his grandfather's diary. But first, they need to deal with all the monsters attacking the city. The next 3 days of slime rage passed, taking thousands of player lives with them. Almost half of the allotted time for this mission has passed. And throughout the entire mission, the players have been losing this war without fail. But as we know, Korean players are not used to backing down. They were ready to fight to the end. And before long, the regular players were joined by high-level heroes. This helped tip the scales back towards the humans. The newcomers also formed separate squads and systematically fought back against the slimes. But more importantly, players who managed to kill 1,000 slimes began to receive the title Slime Destroyer. Players with this rank have increased their defense against slimes by 30% and their damage against them by 40%. With this title, players began to gain even more of an advantage against slimes. And then a new hope shone for the players, hope for victory. During the slime and human war, Jean was able to earn as many as 32,576 decency points. Satan was incredibly happy with this result. Before Jin, he had never seen such malicious players. When suddenly, Satan shouted out, "Good job! We've got to keep it up!" Jean felt uncomfortable that Satan himself was praising him for his evil deed. After accumulating such a huge amount of points, Jin began to think about where to spend them. But then a demon intervened and said, "Look, if we don't intervene urgently, the humans probably hold the victory, even though winning people will have absolutely no effect on Jean." But he decided that if it ended now, it would be too boring. So Jean decided to step into the fray and take the side of the slimes. Because after all, it's a game, and games are supposed to be fun and exciting. Satan seems to be a bad influence on Jin. Meanwhile, at headquarters in Arcadia's apartment, Mr. Chan came to top brass to ask them to shut down the mission. His immediate superior was Ms. Lee. She held the company's highest position of executive director. The slime attack was given 7 days. This is both a lot and a little at the same time. The newcomers' town turned into a battlefield in the blink of an eye. Gradually, everything was coming to an end, the last few days, and as the slimes became weaker and less numerical. The players thought they had given up. In a whole week, with Lime never being able to penetrate the players' defense a wheelbarrow, and in 10 minutes, it's all over. With each passing second, victory was getting closer and closer. But when the timer showed exactly 10 minutes, The sky in all of Arcadia turned red. Such events did not augur well. For victory, the players had one last monster attack to fend off. Led by a rookie assassin, the prolonged terrorization of the slimes by the human race. A confrontation motivated by their inability to continue to get away with murder. The fury caused by the vengeance forces their overlord to do something about it. The ordinary players were terrified. After all, they soberly assessed their chances of victory against such a strong monster. Here it is, the final battle in this war. Players need to kill the Slime Queen, and they only have 10 minutes to do it. Of course, the Queen didn't come on her own. Thanks to her cell division ability, she was able to plant thousands of slimes right inside the fortress. The players had no choice but to run, hoping to hold on for at least those 10 minutes. Only a handful of men were left to hold the fort, and it was led by a young guardian. He knew there was no way they could beat their queen today, but it didn't really need to be, because their mission was to preserve the crystal inside the city. And all they have to do to successfully accomplish this mission is hold her off for 5 minutes. The other players had completely forgotten about it, so they started to panic. But all they had to do was distract the queen from the crystal, and that's something they can do. As suddenly the young guardian said, "We've already come such a long way. Can we afford to give up now? We can't afford it. The honor of the entire Korean server is at stake. We must save the crystal at all costs." You've got to admit, he's a natural leader. He was able to raise the morale of a seemingly defeated army. But what they don't know is that the slimes have the strongest player on the server on their side. Unaware of the internal threat, the players sacrificed their lives by the hundreds for the greater cause. And let's face it, their plan worked. After all, victory was only seconds away. Realizing the inevitability of her defeat, the queen began to raze the city to the ground. The end of this war was only 3 seconds away. And lastly, the guardian decided to leave the queen a small gift. Of course, it had absolutely no effect. But it made absolutely no difference. After all, the war was already over. A human victory. At least that's what they thought. But Jin thought otherwise. Jin personally destroyed the city's defense crystal. It means the humans have lost this war. And there will never be a pledge town again, amidst the ruins of a destroyed city. Jean looked like a real devil, the one who decided the fate of men. At first, the other players thought that the slime had managed to get to the crystal. But when they got to the main square, they saw everything with their own eyes. The other players only had one question as to why he did it. It was at this point that Jean earned the nickname Troll. Now every player on the server will be after him. Some players have even threatened to find the genie in real life, even if it takes them a lifetime to do so. When suddenly, all players within the city limits received a mission failure notice, followed by a notice that all players should leave the city immediately, until it is completely destroyed. Slimes have long been under the oppression of mankind. However, they managed to fight back against the offender in a furious war. The slimes have defeated the human race. And it was all thanks to a genie, a game changer. Now it's time for people to lose their loved ones and their homes. At the end of this war, the slimes occupied lands that never belonged to humans. Now, these lands are ruled by their queen. I must admit, she looks even better in human form. Jean and Satan couldn't help but notice it either. After the slimes win this battle, the town of newcomers falls to the full power of the monsters. All players in the city at that moment were notified that they were in the danger zone, which is only recommended when you reach the 80th level. It's only because the city is now ruled by giant slimes, who can kill a level 30 player with a single blow. After Jin helped the slimes win the war, he understood quite well the meaning of the proverb to be a stranger among his own, even though he's human. Slimes are closer in spirit to him than ordinary people. The next morning, the TV was only carrying news about the events that had happened in Arcadia. They were anchored by a girl named, according to her, the first multiplayer VR game, Arcadia. It has already managed to gain popularity. However, due to recent events within the game, players have flooded the forums with complaints, and it's because of the main scenario and event that took place in Pledgetown. The players failed in the defense of the location, so the newcomers' town turned into a high-level dungeon. Even for Mikado, a game reporter and longtime gamer, this turn of events was quite strange. I have to admit, Jean didn't expect it to cause such a stir amongst all the players. Well, it's not excitement, it's panic. Meanwhile, the Arcadia forums were buzzing. Players did not understand how the game would develop further, when all of a sudden, one person on the forum posted that this whole thing is about the pledge killer. A lot of players lost a lot because of Gina, so Gina decided to lay low for a while. Jean was strictly within the rules of the game, and when you look at it all, he didn't do anything wrong, especially since his hidden profession is the Bard of Anarchy. whose purpose is to wreak havoc. And a familiar, he got the king of hell, the most cunning of all monsters. And the guy who gave the genie his profession was still in his head. He realized that there was more to it than just a game. Jin thought it over, though. He realized that there was no point in hiding because the worst they could do was block his account. And right now it's more important for him to take care of the real world, which is much worse than the virtual world. After all, Jin was in college, and he had to go there once in a while, even if he didn't go to the best university in the country. But he was still glad he'd gotten into it on his own. Upon arriving for his classes, Jin noticed his deskmate watching a video from Arcadia, specifically the video of Jin destroying the defense crystal. He didn't realize when it had been filmed. It was amazing, the end of the war, less than 24 hours later. But this video has already garnered more than 2 million views. You could say that Jin had become something of a global star, even though he didn't understand why people were watching this video. Jin inadvertently got so caught up in the video that he got close to his classmate, when suddenly his roommate said, "I'm Lim, nice to meet you. Have you ever heard of a game called Arcadia?" Jin was a little confused, for he had never met anyone in real life before. Lim began to tell his wife about the recent events in Arcadia. He doesn't seem interested in him. Lim just wants to discuss his favorite game. When suddenly Lim asked, "Jin, have you ever heard of a player like Rookie Killer?" It was a question that shocked Jin. He thought his identity had been compromised. And Lim, with a sly smile on his face, said, "Do you want me to tell you who the killer really is?" Meanwhile, in the front office, the manager, wondering what to do next, since Arcadia's launch. They were prepared for this kind of situation given the mechanics of the game, but no one expected it to seem so serious. At least the event brought the game to the public's attention. So there are some good consequences of what happened. Well, she was amazed that only one player had caused all this commotion. She was incredibly anxious to find out who he was. Meanwhile, at the university, Lim told Jeannie the legend of the freshman killer. Jin easily exhaled, realized that Lim didn't really know what this mysterious rookie killer was. Anyway, Lim seems to be well-versed in all of Arcadia's history, so sooner or later Lim may learn the real name of the rookie killer, but we can think about that later. Now Jin is at uni, and the most important thing is to do well at uni, and Jin's first class this year was computer engineering, taught by Mr. Crass. The first thing he did was to inform his students that henceforth their course would be called Computer Engineering and Virtual Reality, due to the high popularity of Arcadia. Jin was in complete agreement with him. The virtual reality made all computer technology seem old compared to the virtual reality, when suddenly Mr. Crass said, "If we don't change to fit the fast-changing world of technology, we're going down." These words of the teacher did not get out of Jin's head all day long. Jin was greatly annoyed by the constant chatter of the Lim. He wasn't used to constant socializing, when all of a sudden, during lunch, Lim asks Jin why he doesn't play Arcadia. This question, the genie was once again taken by surprise. He was a little confused, but he said he couldn't afford a dreamer, and he didn't like playing games very much. "Jin, there's no way I can allow his identity to be revealed." So he decided to change the subject. He asked Lim if he played Arcadia. Of course Lim does. If his words are to be believed, his character has already reached a fairly high level. Lim offered his help to the genie if he started playing Arcadia. After all, newcomers were showing up in unexpected places nowadays. If Lim had known he was sitting at the same table with the strongest player in all of Arcadia. Jin couldn't help but notice that he was incredibly kind to him. Back in the game, the first thing Jin heard, it was Satan's indignation at his long absence. Jin hadn't logged in for a couple days. After all, completing the last mission had taken 3 sleepless days. He needed to regain his strength. Apparently, Satan was bored without the genie. Could it be that in the absence of a master, Familiar couldn't live his life? When suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a wild scream from deep in the forest. Jin was ready to fight, but as soon as he turned around, he was jumped by the Slime Queen. Apparently, she'd come to thank him, and with it, a whole town of slimes. And everyone wanted to thank Jin for his help. They jumped on their savior. They jumped on him for joy. But the slimes didn't forget about Satan either, even though he enjoyed it. But he wouldn't admit it. After a while, the Slime Queen bowed to the genie, showing her gratitude. And with it, Jin received a notice saying that the slimes would never forget what he'd done to protect them. And with it, he's changed his title from Slime Friend to Slime Rescue. Now they'll come to the genie's rescue at any moment. And with his new title, Jin received a new item. A slime crown. Could it be that he was now their king? Be that as it may, the Wrath of the Slimes mission was successfully completed. In addition to the crown, Jin also received an improvement in his characteristics. His agility in water was increased by 10 points, his intelligence by 5 points, and his physical strength by 7 points. Jin's relatively recently started playing Arcadia and already managed to get so many calls. But it's best not to tell anyone about it. When all of a sudden, the demon said, "Why don't we just get out of here? All this purple stuff is making my eyes water." Jin, without a second's hesitation, decided to go deep into the woods for new adventures. Pledge Town has been completely destroyed by a slime raid. However, the players unexpectedly quickly found a replacement for him. It turned out to be the city of Michael, around which dwells weak monsters. NPCs sell good items. Rumors of a new city of newcomers spread very quickly, and soon players from all over Arcadia began to flock to Mikhail. Jin also decided to try his luck in this city like the other players. But at the entrance to Mikhail, he was stopped by the Guardian. For Jin seemed suspicious to him. But Jin, like the rest of the players, said he came from a town of newcomers, looking for a better life. The Guardian sadly welcomed the genie to the new city and wished him to never meet those monsters again. It turns out that NPCs also talk to each other. This factor should be taken into account, and further control your speech. Gina told the guards that now, instead of Edelin, is a real lair of monsters, and the minimum level to enter there is about 80th. Jin masterfully spoke his teeth to the guard. So the guard decided to issue him a pass to Mikhail without any questions. Jin couldn't help but notice that upon entering the city, Satan began to look around nervously. But when the genie asked him about it, Satan said he didn't know what it was about. This place just looked familiar. Well, how would a demon king know what a city named after an angel looks like? I think Satan's hiding something. Suddenly, Satan says, "Well, master, what are we going to do next?" What we have come to Michael for. But to be honest, Satan was more interested in how Jin would spend the integrity points he'd earned. After all, there were many more points now than when they first met. Satan's mouth wouldn't shut, and he started talking again. "I didn't think you could score so many points. I mean, you've killed over 40,000 people already." Because indeed, Jin had killed more players than he could count. But now, he wasn't going to waste the points he had earned. Upon learning that Jin didn't want to spend them, Satan began to get hysterical and begged Jin to give all the points he had earned to him. And in return, the demon will give the genie the greatest relics Arcadia has ever seen, with which he can conquer the continent. But Jin was firm in his decision. He told Satan that he would go to him if he needed anything. In fact, Satan was able to get Jin interested. He managed to show him a unique item of 150th level, but Jin knew it was a bad idea to rely on Satan for everything. Besides, honesty might be more valuable than he thought, so Gina decided to hold on to his glasses until he could find out more about it. But more importantly, it would be insanely boring. No matter what situation Jin finds himself in, he doesn't forget that it's just a game. Entering the local market, Jin was bombarded with offers to buy anything from a souvenir to a sword. But Jin's main goal at the market was to find a good quest, and if he was lucky, to buy himself some good stuff. Not far from the market there was a big pub where the local laborers rested. Jin overheard two miners talking. They complained about the demand of the mistress of these lands to increase the production of ore. All miners work without a day off and for 13 hours a day. Hearing the miners' conversation, Jin decided that he owed it to himself to meet Mistress Michaela. But it would be foolish to just barge into the palace. And then Jin had what he thought was an ingenious plan. First, he decided to help the miners solve their problem. Once he decided to help the workers, Jin discovered a new ore mining quest. When Satan saw the terms of the quest, she started to get indignant and said that any novice could handle the task. But Jin was of a different opinion, the reason for which was the presence of a huge number of new players in the market, losing everything. And since that's the case, the demand for guns has skyrocketed due to the influx of these players, and a large half of the players reject the ore mining quest. Consider it boring and useless. If you put all the factors together, it turns out that the demand for metal has increased many times over, but its production remained at the same level. Even so, Satan doubted Jin's plan. After all, a monster like him wasn't used to working at all, let alone in a mine, but he couldn't resist his master's will. Plus, it's a great opportunity to make some money. Meanwhile, Baroness Michael was engaged in affairs of state, trying to solve economic problems. Because last month, in Michael's markets, one ore cost 10 bronze. This month, the price has risen to 15. The Baroness realized that at this rate, the smiths would have less and less raw materials to make weapons and armor, which means their quality will deteriorate, while the price will rise. That's why she ordered the miners to increase production. Not far from the city was a huge mountain named Fian. This mountain was the only source of ore for Michael. Inside this mountain, countless mines had been made. But even that was not enough. So Jean went into the darkest corners of the mine, away from human eyes, so no one would interfere with him. Jean didn't want people to see him mining iron ore for one simple reason. He wanted to use the services of Satan. After giving 8,000 decency points to Satan, in return Jean got a drill, Mine Destroyer. The Destroyer's special skill was an incredibly huge reserve of strength, and accelerated mining of all minerals, including iron ore. Meanwhile, 2 of Michael's best blacksmiths were sitting idle, for lack of ore. Previously, artisans never rested, but because of the common players, who refused to mine the ore, they're out of work. The economy in Arcadia completely replicate the real one. Production and consumption, supply and demand, and even imports and exports. All this is fully present in Arcadia. Each region specializes in a different type of raw material, and depending on the season, the demand for a particular product rises or falls. This is how market relations are formed. The most sought-after resource right now is iron ore. This is due to the large number of newcomers immigrating from the city. The constant shortage of iron ore on the market caused the price per piece to more than double. Now iron is the most expensive raw material on the market, and as a result of this, blacksmiths are making big losses. Because no one buys weapons that have gone up in price, the discontent of the ordinary players was growing stronger by the day. But a real miracle could stop such a price rise. The logical question is, if there's such a shortage of iron in the world, why doesn't everyone start mining it themselves? The thing is, it takes more than 2 hours just to get to Shakti, and the extraction itself is not an easy task. Without special tools, it is almost impossible to extract it. But even their presence does not guarantee success. So it was much easier for most players to wait for someone else to get the iron. After all, that way they would have more time to improve their skills, given the complexities and risks of mining. The players decided it was extremely unprofitable, because in the mines, you can die, and in case of death, all the accumulated ore is not saved. But there were some players who thought otherwise. One of those players was Jin. He believed he could become the richest man on the server by mining. Thanks to the tool Jean got from Satan, he was able to do it much faster, while simultaneously upgrading his skills. In a relatively short amount of time, my wife managed to collect a huge amount of ore. So you can consider that spending decency points has paid off. As soon as Jin stopped mining, Satan flew in, with a new offer to improve his drill. Of course, the demon did it for one reason, to get as many integrity points as possible. But it looks like he's really got something interesting this time. In exchange for a vestige of decency, Satan offered the genie an amulet called the Tears of Darkness. At first glance, this amulet looked more ordinary, although one of its key abilities was to increase the speed of resource extraction. That would be of great use to the genie right now, but even that couldn't convince Jean to say goodbye to the remnants of his decency. Plus, you could only use the amulet if you reached level 20. But on the other hand, Jin could sell this item and become the richest man on the server. But then, everyone would know his true power, and the money he could get for that amulet. Enough for a few years in real life. But Jin wasn't going to leave the game yet. When all of a sudden, Jean said, "Listen, Satan, where have you been? You've been gone a long time." But Satan decided to keep the plot quiet, and tell Jin everything. As soon as he finished his mission, Jean couldn't help but notice that Satan was acting strange as soon as they arrived at Michael's. Satan, I was surprised that Jin was able to collect so much ore. Now Jin has more ore in his inventory than the entire barony. Even so, Jin decided to stay in the mine for a couple more days and extract more resources, and then sell them. But money wasn't Jin's only goal. By repeatedly completing missions for the miners, he would gain many friendship points with them. And through that, he wants to attract the attention of Baroness Michael. And meanwhile, letters from the Smiths keep arriving at her residence, asking for their help. Otherwise, all the blacksmiths in the city will close down. To solve this problem, she convened the city council. Council came to this conclusion that because of the large number of new low-level blacksmiths, all the ore being mined is being wasted, while the number of miners remained the same. And there were no people willing to help them at all, when suddenly a sentinel comes running into the Imperial Hall and shouts, "Madam, madam, we need you urgently." The Baroness was surprised at this behavior of her guards. And the thing is, Jean's back in town with the loot, and it's clearly worthy of the town leader's attention. Jin, easily sold all the ore he could get at an inflated price. In 3 days of heavy mining, Jin was able to earn 5 gold coins and 12 silver coins. In real money, it's about 500,000 won. So in 1 day in the mine, Jin earned 170,000 won. Working at this rate, Jin will earn 5 million won a month. That should be enough to pay for a dreamer, an apartment, and even his university tuition. But Jin wondered if he could make more money. He wasn't sure he should make a change, and it would take a lot of preparation and time. When suddenly, Jin's loneliness was interrupted by a woman's voice, asking if he had mined all the ore. It seems Jin's plan has worked. He drew the Baroness's attention to himself. As soon as she came to the genie, he would be sent a gaming notice saying that the Baroness's interest in him had grown. Unexpectedly, the Baroness invited Jin to dine with her and get to know each other better. I wonder if it's possible to have a relationship with an NPC. I think anything is possible in this world. First of all, the Baroness treated her wife to a tea of herbs gathered on Mount Fian. This tea, it was incredibly delicious. This is not surprising. After all, in addition to ore, Mikhail also mines various herbs for healing and food. After skipping the foreplay, the Baroness asked Jin, "All that ore in the main square, how long did it take you to get it?" This time, Jin didn't hide the truth. He told me that he had done everything in just 3 days. When the Baroness heard that, she was furious, because she thought Jin was deceiving her. But when she looked at her face, she realized that she wasn't. And then, she asked Jin if the others could mine ore as fast. Jin told her bluntly that the others couldn't. Then, Jin asked the Baroness why she didn't assemble a large force of miners, one capable of extracting even more ore in the same amount of time. But it wasn't as simple as Jin thought it would be. Suddenly, the Baroness asked him for help. She wanted Jinda as much ore as it would take to rebuild the economy in Mikhaila. Along with this request, Jin received a special assignment, the purpose of which was to collect 100,000 units of iron ore. Jin was very excited to get this assignment. After all, by completing this task, in addition to money, he would also earn himself 4 reputations. That wasn't the only requirement of his mission. In addition to mining ore, he had to engage other players in the miner's quest. In fact, the Baroness' request will not be so easy to fulfill. Arcadia is just a game after all, and people go there to have fun, not to work in the mine, so it will be quite hard to motivate players. But hard doesn't mean impossible, especially since Jin has a plan for that. For starters, he decided to change people's understanding of the profession. Meanwhile, Seoul Pao High School. There was a very interesting dialogue between 2 students. This guy's name is Hai, and he started playing Arcadia at the worst possible time. First, he was killed by rookie assassins. A day later, the slime war began, in which he died over and over again, and even that he endured, and managed to move to Mikhail. And it wasn't all sweet, because of the large influx of newcomers. There was not much choice of profession in the city, so he chose the profession of a merchant, hoping that success would await him there. But the skills he'd learned seemed useless to him. He couldn't even go hunting with them. That's the reason why Hay abandoned the Arcadia. He found it boring. But his best friend Che showed him a video of a Jin and told him that Arcadia could be fun for more than just hunting. And there were thousands of players like Hai. But Jin's video blog about mines brought their interest back to the game. Of course, the main lure for gamblers was money. That's why Jin wasn't shy about bragging about his earnings. You have to admit, this method works for everyone. After all, everyone wants to be rich. In addition to being enticing in his videos, Jin also educated the newbies, gave useful tips and some tricks. The first thing Jin recommended to anyone who was going to go into the mine was to increase their ore mining skill level. With the increase of this skill, players will be able to speed up their mining and increase their chance of obtaining rare resources. Jin is now A-ranked and finds at least 1 magical crystal every day. In the world of Arcadia, magic crystals are extremely expensive. Therefore, all players will first try to pump their skills. And the only place you can improve your skill is in the mine. And in just 1 day, Jin was able to earn 1 gold and 80 silver pieces. For a novice gambler, that kind of money was an unattainable goal. The new channel about Arcadia instantly tore up all the platforms. Destroyer's Everyday Life took the leading position among all the channels about the game. In fact, Jin left a lot out and in some places lied, because the extraction speeds shown in his video is only possible with a specialized drill. Jin left out crucial details in his videos. This created the illusion that anyone can get just as good a result.
However, his videos captured the attention of naive newcomers and created quite a stir throughout Arcadia.
Rookies by the hundreds became miners, And it's all thanks to Jean's video blog. The Baroness was really excited about it. She couldn't believe that all the Idlewilds were now volunteering to go into the mine. And among those who decided to become miners were not only blacksmiths, but also other professions. She wondered how the genie had managed to do that. Jean said it was no big deal. He was just pushing a basic human need, more specifically, the need for money. People will do anything for a handful of shiny coins. But the Baroness still didn't understand how the genie had done it. But she recognized that his method had worked. However, it was too early to relax. The Baroness had some very important measures to take. For starters, we need to cut the miners' wages, and in return, give them a percentage of the ore mined. Then they'll be more motivated, and the lazy people who fool around instead of working will be quickly weeded out. That way, you can maximize production. No investment. All these ideas were Jin's. Judging by the Baroness's reaction, Jin thought she didn't know anything about economics. So he felt it was his duty to teach her how things were done in the harsh reality. But most of all, the Baroness was concerned about the price per unit of ore. After all, it was now 23 bronzes. But Jean, I've convinced you not to worry about it, because the price of smith services hasn't gone up. Even though the price of ore has gone up. It must be said that before the prices for ore were too low. That is why no one wanted to mine it. And if the smiths resent the high prices, then let them go to the mines and mine the ore themselves. That's what the market is all about. If there is supply, there is demand. For the Baroness, it was still unclear. But all in good time. The genie will gradually teach her everything. Suddenly, the Baroness offered the genie instead of the city's finance ministers, even though the offer was very tempting. But Jean had to turn it down. After all, he is an adventurer. But Jean, he did all this. Not out of the goodness of his heart. It was all for one thing. Upon successful completion of the mission, the Baroness offered the genie her assistance. Jean knew it would happen sooner or later. So he prepared himself. It's a long day's journey, only for the Baroness to help the genie with his business plan. Or rather, with its realization. After all, the head of the city has much more money than any player. One person can only earn a limited amount of money. Unfortunately, it is stipulated in the rules. And Jin wondered what it would take to remove those restrictions. And it's a lot easier than he thought. All you have to do is gain power over the other players and take over the food chain. Baroness was both horrified and delighted at Jin's plan, but to tip the scales in his favor. Jin promised to make Mikhail the commercial center of all Arcadia. A few thousand years ago, there was a great war of angels and demons in Arcadia. Their battles lasted for decades, and each side was ready to fight to the last man. And who do you think led the demon army? It's our little Satan and the side of light, led by a follower of the sacred spirit. Archangel Michael, wielding the sacred spear. And that time, the war ended in a victory for good. And since then, Satan and Michael have never been heard of, until today. But for now, only Jin knows of their return. All of which explains Satan's strange behavior in this town. For he senses the presence of the Archangel. When suddenly, Satan asked Jean what was in the bundle he gave the Baroness. But Jean decided to hide his plans from Satan, so he couldn't make any adjustments. But Jin decided to open the veil a little bit. He said, if the average player is lucky enough to stumble upon a vein, he can at best produce 10 units of ore per hour. And the rare ore I occasionally dig up is mostly due to a unique tool I own. So far, Satan doesn't realize anything except that mining is a thankless job. Well, does that mean it's impossible to make money from it? Not exactly. There is one way. Who came up with the idea? He'll be selling tickets to enter the mine. And those who don't have money to enter will be able to pay on the way out. The only thing Jin was questioning was what price to charge to enter the mine. When suddenly, he said, I think people will quickly realize it's a scam. So, I'm going to start with a price of 1 gold coin. What do you think about that, Satan? He was speechless when he heard the price. The demon knew people were stupid, but not stupid enough to pay such a high price to enter the mines. But Jean was sure that people would be willing to shell out such a huge sum of money, with the assurance that it would pay off many times over in the mine. When he heard the whole plan, Satan was delighted. He thought Jean was a real devil, who, without a shred of guilt, was willing to exploit other people. When suddenly Satan says, Master, please follow me. I have a place to show you. I swear you won't regret it. Gina, I was surprised to hear that request. It was the first time Satan had asked him for something without asking for anything in return. Jean, out of interest, agreed to the offer, and Satan led him to an abandoned mine, the whole time they were in the new city. Satan had a feeling he'd been to this place before. And when he found this huge gate, he remembered something. When suddenly the demon whispered, "I finally found them! Eat the chickens with halos!" To the genie, this gate seemed very strange. After all, the entrance looks long abandoned, but the iron didn't rust and the wood didn't rot. So there's some kind of spell on this gate. Obviously, no one would just cast a spell on a normal mine gate. So Gene decided to open it. But as soon as his hand approached the gate, an information window appeared informing him that Jin was not strong enough to break the magical seal. But at the same time, Jin has learned a new skill, excavating relics. If he reports this place to the Baroness, he'll get a special reward. Jin told Satan that he couldn't open that gate because of the spell cast on it. Angry, the demon said, "Of course. That's why I brought you here. You really don't know anything about your power, do you?" Satan, it was annoying that such power was wielded by a stupid man, who can't even use it. And then, out of pure interest, Satan asked the genie what he knew about his powers. To be perfectly honest, Jin knew absolutely nothing about his abilities, except that he could improve the monster thanks to her. Satan said that the power given to the genie was beyond divine authority. Thanks to it, the genie can do anything to upset the balance of the world, to change the nature of things and control the environment. Jin is the closest thing to the power of creation. When he learned of his true power, Jin realized he was a kind of god in Arcadia. Knowing your power is good, but understanding it, how it works, and how to use it are completely different things. When Satan could not stand it, he cried out in desperation, "Anything! You can do anything! Anything at all! I can't believe you don't understand that!" After a long 10 minutes, Jin finally started to realize something. The first thing he realized, it was that a creature like Satan needed the power of decency to interact with his environment. In fact, integrity points take an incredibly long time to accumulate, and in very small quantities. But Jin's process is accelerated by his good relationship with the monsters. And the points Satan has gotten from Jin lately, on his own, he would have taken at least 1,000 years to collect. It turns out that, thanks to his power, there are absolutely no obstacles in front of the genie. But every time he tried to open this gate, the result was negative. After the war of light and darkness, the angels put their seal on this gate, trying to keep them safe from humans. But with Jin's power, it won't work. Jin may not be fully aware of his power, but even the angelic seal of protection is nothing to him. But the demon promised to help the genie realize his full power. Jin tried opening the gate again, but this time with a clear intention to do so. And this time, as soon as Jin touched the gate, the seal felt his power. To open this gate, the genie will need to give 15,000 points. Jin, for the same cost, he could have bought 2 legendary items. However, why else would he have the decency to do such a thing? After all, it's much more interesting than just doing missions. Breaking the seal and opening the gate, Jin discovered an unidentified divine altar. And the reason Satan was so eager to get here is because this is the lair of the angels. This place is legendary. It is better known to the world as the stairway to heaven, the great war of demons and angels. At that time, the lands of Arcadia became one big battlefield for the higher beings. If it were not for the protection of the world tree, perhaps no mortal being would survive. A millennium has passed since then, but the echoes of the horror of the Great War. The echo of the horror of the Great War still echoes in the hearts of the residents of Arcadia. The war was a warning to future generations. People prayed and still pray that such a thing would never happen again. By opening the secret location, the genie has once again caused panic in the main office. It was because the stairway to heaven could only be opened by a hero who had reached level 693. The developers expected this area to take over a decade to open up. On top of all that, they had a whole bunch of problems created by the genie, especially since the incident in Pledge City ended only 2 days ago. Mr. Khan made a report and explained that the whole incident was due to a secret location in Fian Mountain. After reviewing all the materials, Mr. Chan was very surprised. After all, Miss Fian was originally intended for humans, but now she's in the full possession of the angels. No one knew that. Mintfiane was originally called the Stairway to Heaven, because it was on it that angels first descended, and the abundance of ore was the purpose of somehow hacking up the stairs from the side. Simply put, in the mountain is the entrance to the angels' dimension. With each passing day, Arcadia became more and more mysterious, even to Mr. Chan. But most of all, he was confused by the hidden name of this mission. When suddenly, Mr. Khan says, "Sir, we've done an in-depth analysis of all the previous and connecting missions, and I can say with 100% certainty that the second great war of angels and demons is coming." Jean, without realizing it, started the worst war in history. And it was all due to his trust in Satan. Driven only by a lust for revenge, Jin had never seen demons so cheerful and upbeat before.
Once inside, Satan couldn't stop humming the same song. I'm clipping my wings, I'm clipping my wings.
But for the genie, there was also a reward. In the form of the sacred treasure. Naturally, the chest was protected, and only an entity who knows the ancient tongue can open it. When suddenly Jin wondered whether he should remove the object. After all, it had been said before that he could get a special reward for reporting the altar to the Baroness, but if he thought so, he didn't have much choice. If Jin didn't know about the backstory of this place, he would probably be on his way to the Baroness by now. But after hearing the stories, Jin couldn't just let it go. Especially since Baroness Michael is unlikely to find a bounty more valuable than an artifact from the stairway to heaven. More importantly, Jin opened this location using decency points, effectively making him a tomb raider. And if he told anyone else about this place, there might be questions. So without a single doubt, Jin decided to open this treasure house. It looked like Satan was about to burst with impatience. What could be in there? But after an hour, the genie and Satan still couldn't open the chest. And it wasn't even the magical defenses. It was all about Jin pumping his physical strength, being Satan in his true form. He would have had the strength of one little finger to pull that lid off, when suddenly the wife gets a brilliant idea. Because the only thing stopping them from the treasure is a huge stone lid. It's time to use your drill. This lid doesn't work any other way. So Jin had no other choice. And in this case, destruction is the only true solution. And already, thanks to the drill, Jin was able to destroy that lid. It sounds absurd, but it's a fact. After opening the treasury, Jin received a special achievement and the title, Destroyer of Divine Relics. The heavenly entities are shocked by such an act, and heaven's favor with the genie has fallen to 0. So he'd better stay out of the sight of the holy entities. It can't be. This is the treasure? Turns out it wasn't a chest. It was someone's sarcophagus. Jin wasn't happy about disturbing someone's eternal slumber. So he wanted to take only the most valuable things. And the most valuable and only valuable treasure was the holy necklace. Is a necklace the angels have saved for the future. And now, Jin will take it, thus depriving the angels of their secret weapon. Jin now possesses the strongest weapon of the angels, the shining medallion of heaven. Jin felt an incredible power when he touched him. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, not even with Satan. He could feel the holy energy filling his entire body. Now it was hard to imagine what Jin could do. After absorbing the power of the medallion, Jin unlocked the hidden class of Holy Prophet. But because Jin already had one hidden profession, the Holy Medallion was temporarily deactivated. But in order to fix this problem, Jin needs to contact customer service. But Jin couldn't do that because then he'd reveal his identity. So he decided to figure it out on his own. Meanwhile, Jin's plan to become a millionaire was in full swing. Guardsmen, stopping any player who didn't show a pass. Wait, it's Hey! I'm glad he's back in the game! The fee for going to the mine is a real surprise to Hai. After all, the video that made him decide to go back didn't have that information. But the Guardian told him that due to the influx of new miners, the rules had been changed. And Hay decided to inquire, how much would a month's pass cost, given the price of ore and the glut on the market? A month's pass cost 30 gold coins. That price was too much for Hay to pay. So to pay for the pass, he has to earn at least 1 gold a day. That's 100,000 won. It's easy to calculate that it's 3 million won a month. And then Hay said, "Could you lend me some money? I came here to earn some money. I'll pay you back, I promise." But the Guardian laughed out loud and said, "Don't worry, especially for people like you, Baroness. I have invented a system called Go Now, Pay Later. Newcomers can find out more about this service at the help center near Shakti." At the front desk, there was a charming young woman sitting there. It was done on purpose. After all, most of the newcomers who come to Shakti are men. And so, the easiest thing to do is to talk them into using this service. Everyone who agrees to use the Come Now and Pay Later service, they're called slave checkers. And believe me, this name was given to them for a reason, a mine in Mount Fianne. Until recently, the place was desperately short of labor. Now, however, there are even more willing people than necessary, and they all dream of getting rich. The cage door slammed shut behind these poor souls. The administration, I couldn't believe how many people fell for that trick. It's the lust for easy profit that's to blame. That drowned out their voices of reason. People close to the Baroness realized it wasn't her idea. And then rumors began to spread through the town that it was all the first miner's idea, while Jin tried to deal with the sacred amulet. His mission to alarm the Baroness had already been accomplished by the other players, but in order to collect the reward for completing this mission, Jin had to meet her in person. When all of a sudden Jin said, "Satan, guess what? I am now a criminal grave desecrator and a thief. I'm the real scum of the earth." And by the looks of it, Gina wasn't the least bit embarrassed about it. But if someone found out about it, Jin's life would become even more complicated, so he has to keep it a secret at all costs. And in order to do that, we have to get rid of all possible evidence. Is Jin really going to destroy the stairway to heaven? But that's exactly what he was going to do. And I have to admit, he's gotten pretty good at it. I wonder how much this will affect the world order in Arcadia. Jin, he was insanely pleased with himself, because he felt impunity. By blocking the exit, he'd destroyed any chance of his discovery. Even Satan was shocked at this behavior and involuntarily cried out, "Master, I have much to learn from you." Having finished all his business in the mine, Jin immediately came to the Baroness to collect his reward. Mikhail, it was extremely good to see Jean, a little too happy, as suddenly she said, "You don't realize how many people voluntarily gave themselves to us as slaves after hearing the prohibitive price of mine passes. After this reform, there are 9,000 workers in Shakti, and before, only 300 worked." Even Jin didn't expect his plan to bear such fruit. Their first meeting, Michael was nowhere near as cheerful as she is now, but Jin didn't come here for small talk. He came here for his reward. As promised, Jin got 10% of all proceeds. That 10%? That's crazy money in both worlds, which amounted to 120 gold coins and 23 silver coins. That's about 120 million won. But that wasn't all. The Baroness offered the genie a position in the city, and split all the money he earned in half. In the event that Jean agrees, Baroness Michael's favor will be greatly increased. That offer sounds tempting, very tempting indeed. But to make such a big decision, Jean needed time to think it over. Virtual reality Arcadia. In this boundless world, a hidden history has been born. It's funny how it started with one person, and for another man.
This whole world was created for one purpose. And all the talk about freedom of choice is really nonsense.
This guy's name is Jack, and he's the mastermind behind Arcadia. Arcadia, a kind of prison for Jack's lover, better known in the world as Alice. She is the heart and soul of Arcadia. Jack didn't really care about anything that happened in the game. He only cared about Alice's safety. But she's been busy lately, and the reason for that was a data contradiction error, which required her intervention. Even Jack didn't think it was possible. He added a hidden Anarchy Bart class, just as an interesting feature of the game. But it looked like he had a destroyer in his world. But for Jack, it was even more interesting. Jack was intensely interested in Jean's personality, so he began to study his file. And what a surprise he was when he found out that in addition to the Anarchy Bart, the genie also has the Holy Prophet class, because these classes were meant for the protagonists of the struggling sides of the great war of angels and demons. After figuring it all out, Jack wasn't surprised that there was an error in the system. No one could have imagined that such a thing could happen. Alice could not function properly because of the constant error. But she couldn't give Jin the Holy Prophet class. Jack promised to deal with it a little later. First, he decided to reward Jean for finding such a rare artifact. So he ordered Alice to change some of the characteristics of the Holy Medallion. Well, first, he decided to restore balance to the world, and to do that he brought in Michael. Meanwhile, Jin was still thinking about the Baroness's proposal. After weighing the pros and cons, Gina decided to give a negative answer, which surprised Michaela a lot, with the argument that he's just a traveler. He's not interested in such titles. But he promised that once he had explored the entire continent, he would return. But even that answer satisfied her. In fact, further cooperation with the Baroness would only cause the genie problems. Before Jean left, Michaela gave him a letter of recommendation on her behalf. With this letter, Jin can get protection anywhere in the kingdom. That's quite a generous gift from her. Jean was insanely grateful. But out of curiosity, I asked her why he might need protection. The thing is that Jin was so engrossed in his missions that he completely lost sight of the overall situation on the server. And it was chaos. The Baroness tells me that things have not been going well in the royal family lately. The king is dying and his heir will soon ascend the throne. However, the prince is still too young to rule an entire kingdom, and his courtiers manipulate him at will to gain power and position. About the worst of them all, Duke Birchin. He's become the shadow leader of the nobles, gathering the entire upper nobility around him, and he's trying to make the prince his puppet. Moreover, he encourages the people to go to war against a neighboring state. People are sure he just wants to suck up the treasury under the pretext of war expenses. I think what will happen to the country if the Duke gets his way is beside the point. The genie didn't expect things to be so complicated in the kingdom. So the genie didn't really want to get involved in the whole thing. Suddenly, the Baroness said, "In the letter, I detailed how you helped me solve the problem in the city. If you show it to the royal family, even they will give you a warm welcome." Well, first the genie needs to find an Earl of Brocken, who can appreciate his talents. Just not this. Jin just thought he wanted to stay out of the whole thing. Suddenly, there was a mission. But this mission was very different from the others. This time, he didn't even have a choice to accept or not. It turns out Jin doesn't have a choice. So we're gonna have to get into this up to our necks. After saying goodbye to the genie, the Baroness promised to help him if he needed it. The best help she could do would be to not give him this foolish mission. But it's too late. Jin was beginning to doubt that being friends with the Baroness was a good idea, when suddenly the girl whispered, "I'm 100% sure. Even a fool would have realized after meeting him that this adventurer will change the world," and she wasn't wrong. The decision and action of a player under the nickname Dex started to rapidly change the world Arcadia. It doesn't matter if he wanted it or not, and in which direction he was trying to direct the course of events. His actions have changed more than one fate. The magnitude of his contribution is absolutely undeniable. Even if things don't always make sense, this world was made for the players. So can we condemn him for playing exactly as the creator originally intended? And more importantly, the mess he's about to make, his so-called accomplishments, will eclipse all of his previous misdeeds, so much so that they'll seem charming in comparison. Before beginning their long journey, Satan suggested that the genie give up the idea. After all, even for him, politics was too much. But Jin's philosophy was simpler than that. Once you've started, you've got to finish the job. Either way, it's all purely for integrity points. So why don't we just get this whole mess straightened out? Suddenly, Jin received a game notification stating that the system error had been successfully fixed, and the parameters of the item Shining Heavenly Medallion had been completely changed. Jin, already anxious to learn the power of his new item, when suddenly the light around the medallion began to fade, and the medallion itself gained wings. But Satan knew those wings well. After all, they were the ones that had sent him back to hell the last time. The shining celestial medallion connected the genie to a higher self, and summoned his personal guardian angel. But the biggest problem was that it was impossible to take it off. From now on, Jin has two familiars, and they both want to kill each other. And Jin's new familiar is her brilliant holiness Archangel Michael. Angels and demons, they've been each other's sworn enemies since the beginning of time, and simply cannot coexist peacefully under the same sky. Which is why the meeting between the leaders of both races was more awkward than one might expect. Suddenly Michael says, "I thought you disappeared. Now I see. You're destroying everything sacred. You're completely out of your mind." Michaela was also proving to be sharp on the tongue. Jin was having a hard enough time getting along with Satan, and now he needed supervision to make sure they didn't kill each other. Jin tried with all his might to calm them down, but the shouting didn't continue from both sides, as a friend in Michael's quarrel mentioned the sacred spear she'd used to kill Satan last time, which piqued Jin's interest. Their quarrel sounds like the bickering of two children. I can't even believe they're legendary creatures from myths. As suddenly, Michaela asked Jin, "That's you, the man who made a contract with Satan, right?" Jin didn't know what to expect from her, so he started making excuses that the contract with Satan had been made without his knowledge. Michaela was very upset to hear that. After all, the power that Jin had could destroy the whole world in the wrong hands, because you can't break a contract with a familiar. Michaela asked Jin not to give in to Satan's temptation, and since a player can only have one familiar, Michaela became Jin's personal guardian angel. "Friend," Satan said, "Hey chicken, you think I'm going to let you get into my master's head? Don't forget who you're dealing with. I, Satan the Demon Lord, promise you that this innocent-looking guy, 10 times worse disgusting than my best demons." Jin didn't even know how to take his words, as praise or a joke. But he's right. The Bard of Anarchy class, apparently designed to bring destruction and chaos to Arcadia's world. To be fair, so far all of Jin's actions have been anything but evil. But the angels see things a little differently, for them. Humans are God's greatest creations, with goodness in their hearts. The angels believe it is their mission to discover and nurture it, and from that moment on, Michael's main mission, to guide Jin to the path of goodness, couldn't stand all that divine speech. Satan shouted, "Listen to me. I will shut my eyes to your presence for the Master's peace of mind. But his integrity is mine, okay? I'll kill you if you try to get your hands on it. Michaela, asked to be called Ellie from now on. She found Satan's words amusing enough. She added, "You foolish demon, you shouldn't have even tried to take your master's power. It seems like they're gonna be at odds forever. What can you do? It's their nature." Jean was just stressed out by the fact that he had plus one chatty friend. Whether you're a demon or an angel, it doesn't matter. Because money rules the world. Everything is subject to the capitalist law of the market economy. When all of a sudden, Jean said, "About integrity, I didn't give it to Satan for nothing. So I have one question for you." Jean was only interested in one question. What could Ellie give him in return for the integrity points? "Ellie, there's a life lesson to be learned. Nothing in life is free." After thinking for a couple minutes, Ellie suggested that the genie choose some weapons from her arsenal. Jin suddenly said, "Look, my fighting skills are not impressive at all, so I need abilities to fight a stronger opponent." In other words, Jean needed power. Bard of Anarchy, definitely an awesome skill. The ability to gain decency points is really worth it, but this class definitely has its drawbacks. The most important disadvantage of this class was the lack of a pumping system. Jin's skills so far are only non-combat skills like mining and diving. Of course, Satan can give him good items to compensate for his lack of strong attack skills. New weapons also have their limits. It is for this reason that Jin wants to get at least a couple of combat skills. When suddenly a contract was made with an angel, again without Jin's knowledge, and with it, or granted him the skill of divine intervention, which allows you to trade decency points for higher power, but only temporarily. A skill that was perfect for a genie. After all, the more power, the more decency points. Only after obtaining this skill, Jin immediately decided to test it. After all, with such strength, any monster should be no match for him. Such an outpouring of holy energy, it almost killed Satan. But it didn't. Divine intervention, for time allows the genie to borrow the power of holy heroes, such as Knight of Honor Farhan, or the great wizard Merlin, whose power is known throughout the kingdom, Gina. The power of the legendary archer Purcell is also available, which easily hit a penny from a distance of more than a kilometer. And of course, Jin has access to the power of a Merfin thief. His stealth allows him to hide from all eyes. After exploring the possibilities, Jin shouted out, "This is incredible! I'm invincible!" Apparently, the large release of holy energy attracted a large number of monsters to the genie. "Those goblins showed up just in the nick of time. On them! Jin is going to try out his new ability." He couldn't wait to find out what kind of power he had. Meanwhile, in one of the mines of Mount Fianne, players were working day and night. Some may not believe it, but all these people are playing a game, hoping to get rich after one find. But they are all idiots, and didn't realize that their dream was unrealizable. They began to accept that their fates were sealed. Hay was among them, especially since all his friends in Arcadia are hunting. He can't tell his friends that he's a slave in the mine because he's ashamed. Realize all your pity. He decides to escape from this mine. But it wasn't as easy as I'd hoped. The exit of the shorts was guarded by two huge bruisers, who were keeping order. Even more so, it was the other players who gave him the benefit of the doubt. They thought the players who tried to escape were real idiots, and that's because Jean's plan was well thought out. And in the event of a successful escape, the player will be considered a deserter for breaking his contract with the Baroness. And in all of Arcadia, that player would become a criminal. So the only right thing to do was to work off his debt and get back to the game. In an entire 2 weeks, he had only managed to raise his level to 5th. And in that time, he managed to get the title of Tenacious Miner. And the longest burning flame showed interest in him. Meanwhile, Jim was busy preparing for his battle with the monsters. But a Knight of Honor Farhan, legendary. A holy warrior who always brings victory to those who stand behind him. And his sword, it frightens all evil demons. And the lives of thousands have been saved by his shield. Just the fact that he's here is like a promise of victory. That's why they call it a living honor. However, the demons who are his enemies call him by a different name. Among the demons, he was known as the Devil Farhan Destroyer. Exactly, the power of Farhan, Jean decided to try it first. Now Jin is able to use all the skills of a Knight of Honor. For Satan, it was a real surprise. After all, this shield and sword was familiar to him. It was only now that Jin realized the true power of divine descent. It was more incredible than he had ever imagined. When suddenly Satan cried out, "Why? Why did you choose this idiot?" Satan was angry about it. For Farhan killed all demons, even those who had done nothing. Well, doesn't that mean he's a holy warrior who's accomplished a great feat? Although from the demon's point of view, he's a murderer and a criminal. Well, Jin has kept the monster waiting long enough, it's time to try out the true power of the Holy Warrior. Farhan was famous even among ordinary monsters. Therefore, the goblins immediately sensed his presence. After Jin left Mikhail, he took a special route. Jin used a trail that is deep in the woods and unvisited by anyone, is a shortcut that leads to the next goal. But all the players don't even go near this forest. And the reason for that is the field boss. This monster is level 25, which in the world of Arcadia is pretty good. But it's his axe hook that's the most dangerous. But with the power of a Farhan, any attacks from such a monster, for a genie, it's just a game. A shield of unwavering will. A shield that can withstand a blow from any fiend, even the devil, repelling the orc's attack. Jin shouted out, "Well, now it's my turn. Please don't die too quickly." The holy shield went into battle mode. Jin activated the passive, Justice Conviction skill and Flame of Blazing Dawn. When they saw the Farhat spirit, the goblins were frightened. They begged for mercy. But his wife, all he needed was their heads, so mercy was not part of his plan. After dealing with the monsters, the genie got a notice, which informed him that the Divine Descent skill had been deactivated, and the decency calculation would be based on the total amount of time he used the skill, and how he used it. After seeing Jin take out 3 huge monsters in one punch, Ellie started to worry, because she didn't expect that even with the Divine Dissension skill, a person would be able to do such a thing. But in the end, she was happy that her maker had sent her to him. After all, she felt that Jin could change the future. Even though Satan and Michael are almighty beings, they need rest just like ordinary people. And while they slept, Jin decided to learn a little more about his new skill. Such interest in Jin's new ability brought a sense of unbridled power, one that wanted nothing more than to destroy the darkness. His strength is that he covers the difference in levels with his opponent with his effect. Initially, he was aided solely by items purchased from Satan. However, they did not cost him much. The genie couldn't buy all the weapons he had that had their own limitations in use. It turns out that since he doesn't have an arsenal for all occasions, he has to rely on luck at times in battle. That's why Jin didn't acquire any combat items. It's good to have the problem solved, but this ability has one huge downside, and that is its price. Killing 3 monsters took him about 3 minutes. Even if he slowed down, it wouldn't take more than 5 minutes. And yet it took away so many points of integrity. It's scary to imagine how many he'd spend fighting a real tough opponent. But that's half the battle. Jin will have to learn the skills of each of the holy warriors. But on the bright side, it's pretty fun. When suddenly Jin heard an angelic voice say, "You've just, on the downside of divine intervention called fun. Well, well, well." The genie was surprised Ellie was up so early. Angels are all early birds. Unlike some people. Or, she saw Jin worried about wasting a lot of integrity points. But she convinced him that it was still too low a price to pay for wielding Farhan's power. Far more interesting, however, is what decency can do. It can make the impossible possible. It's an amazing power, and the genie should have been more careful in allocating those points to their new friends. Even though Jin still felt a little cheated, he had more options now, and he should appreciate it. When Gina decided that he would use this skill only when necessary and strictly control the timing of its use, the Kingdom of Marin. The Korean server of Arcadia is based in this territory, and at the moment the internal affairs of the state are not going as smoothly as everyone would like. Nevertheless, among its neighbors, Marin is considered a powerful and prosperous power. The kingdom is located in the heart of the second continent of Arcadia. Thus, its geographical location helps it to generate income from trade intermediation. The strategic position brought him a lot of profit. It's easy to guess that there are several major trade associations in the kingdom, and the largest merchants in the entire kingdom only operate with the permission of these associations. The main one was GM, and this man is the deputy manager of that company. His name is John. Meanwhile, the Duke of Baron was pushing various guilds to start a war with a neighboring kingdom, but the regular guilds needed state support to do so, which they came to the Duke for, and that's how he laundered the money. As a normal NPC, he had an extremely sharp tongue. The Duke could easily command an entire army if he wanted to. Is a dangerous man who is the subject of many rumors. Everyone knows that he has his sights set on the throne. However, for Gem, he is the best candidate for an ally. And this guy is the head of GM. His name is Chow. He's been preparing for this meeting for a long time. Chow, in real life the youngest son of the chairman of GM Group. In his father's company, he was not successful. Because under the burden of responsibility, he constantly failed in important tasks. But in Arcadia, things turned out differently. Whatever Chu is, He's a great merchant who made the Great GM Merchant Association, the most powerful guild in all the kingdoms. And with the advent of Arcadia, Chu opened a division in his father's company to make money through gaming. In simple words, he made money from the game. It turns out that representatives of the real and digital worlds have met at the negotiating table. Chow did his best to get the Duke's attention. Arcadia's world really does give players a lot of choice. The Duke has made a contract with GM. They are obliged to supply the Duke and his army with unlimited quantities of wheat. And in turn, the Duke promises to give Chu full influence over the logistical routes of the entire kingdom. But the main condition of their deal was not to attract outside attention. For Chow, this was a real chance to make a huge fortune and consolidate his influence in the whole kingdom. The GM will help the Duke supply the kingdom with supplies. If he succeeds in conquering the kingdoms of Parkle, he will take the throne, succeeding the king. If that happens, the entire Korean Arcadia server will fall right into Cho's hands. Meanwhile, Jin arrived at the Earl of Broken just as Baroness Michael had instructed. Giving the letter of recommendation to Earl, Jin said, "The contents of the opinion are known, but I was told that if I showed it to you, I would get protection. I was also told that there was some other information about me. But the Earl of Brocken was not the kind of man who cared about letters. He trusted the choice of his friends." So the Count asked Jin why the Baroness had sent him to him. Jin pretended not to expect such a question. But in fact, he was prepared for it. He had read on the forums that the Count was a very principled man. Playing dumb, Jin said, "I don't know that either. She just told me to find you."